By the time the pale morning sun rose over Paris on October 16, 1793, the woman sitting in the back of the wooden cart was already a ghost. The world remembered her as Marie Antoinette, the symbol of excess, the hated queen who supposedly laughed while her people starved. But the figure sitting in the open air, shivering in a plain white dress, bore no resemblance to the portraits hanging in the palaces of Europe. She was only 37 years old, yet she looked 60. Her hair, once a golden halo that dictated the fashion of an empire, had been brutally hacked off by rusty scissors, leaving jagged white strands against her pale neck. She sat straight, her hands bound so tightly the rope bit into her skin, staring past the screaming mob that lined the streets to see her die. If you think you know the story of the French Revolution, you only know the political side. You don't know the personal hell that preceded the blade. Killing her wasn't enough for the revolutionaries. They needed to break her. They needed to drag her from the height of divinity to the mud of humiliation. If you are drawn to the dark, untold corners of history where silence speaks louder than screams, subscribe now. Because what they did to Marie Antoinette in her final 76 days wasn't just an execution. It was a slow, deliberate torture designed to destroy a mother before destroying the queen. August 1793. The heat of the summer was suffocating, but inside the Conciergerie Prison, the air was cold and smelled of the river Seine and rotting straw. This place was grimly known as the Antechamber of Death. Few who entered these walls ever left alive. Marie Antoinette was no longer addressed as Your Majesty. She was simply prisoner number 280, or sometimes, with a sneer, the widow capet. She was thrown into a cell that was partially underground. The floor was brick, often slick with mud. Moisture dripped constantly from the ceiling, turning everything green with mold and soaking her few belongings. Her furniture consisted of a folding cot, a straw mattress, and a cheap cane chair. But the physical squalor was the least of her torture. The true punishment was the memory of what she had lost. The once most powerful woman in France, who lived in the gilded halls of Versailles, surrounded by silk and laughter, was now an animal in a dark zoo, forced to rot in silence while the world outside demanded her blood. Privacy is the last dignity of the human soul, and they stripped her of it completely. 2 gendarmes, armed guards, were stationed inside her tiny cell 24 hours a day. They were under strict orders. Never take your eyes off her. She slept under their gaze. She ate her meager meals of broth and boiled vegetables under their gaze. She dressed and undressed behind a small, flimsy screen, knowing that they could see her silhouette, knowing they were listening to the rustle of her clothes. She was never alone with her grief. Not for a second. Imagine the psychological weight of that. The once most powerful woman in France was now watched by men who hated everything she represented. Every movement was recorded, every small attempt at dignity blocked. The hours melted into one another under the constant dripping from the ceiling. This surveillance wasn't merely control. It was a constant reminder that she was no longer queen, no longer mother, barely even considered human, just a body under guard. Yet, the damp walls and the staring eyes were not what broke her. The revolutionaries knew that to truly crush Marie Antoinette, they couldn't just attack the queen. They had to attack the mother. Months before her transfer to the Conciergerie, she had been separated from her son, Louis Charles. He was only 8 years old. The guards had come in the middle of the night. Marie had fought them, physically fought them, placing her body between her son and the soldiers. She pleaded, she screamed, she bargained. He is only a child. She cried, but they tore the weeping boy from her arms. That was the wound that never healed. In the silence of her new cell, she wasn't mourning her crown. She was haunted by the memory of her son's terrified cries. Inside the conciergerie, she possessed almost nothing, but she managed to hide a small black pouch in the bosom of her dress. Inside it was a lock of her husband's hair and a lock of her children's hair. It was her most precious treasure. The jailers would later mock her, saying her son was being taught to curse her name. And the truth was even worse. They were weaponizing her own child against her. October 14, 1793. The trial began. But let's be clear, this was not a trial. It was a performance. A piece of theater written with blood. The room was packed with people who had paid for seats to watch the Austrian wolf be cornered. They expected a weeping, hysterical woman begging for mercy. Instead, they saw a woman in a faded black mourning dress, walking with a limp but holding her head high. The prosecutor, Fouquier Tinville, unleashed a torrent of accusations, blaming her for the bankruptcy of France and the war. When political charges failed to incite the crowd, he played his vilest card. He accused Marie Antoinette of incest with her own 8-year-old son. A gasp went through the courtroom. It was an accusation so horrific, so obviously fabricated, that even her enemies felt uncomfortable. Marie sat silent at first. When taunted for her silence, she finally rose. She turned away from the judges and faced the crowd. Her voice rang out like a bell. If I have not answered, it is because nature itself refuses to answer such a charge laid against a mother. I appeal to all mothers in this room. For a heartbeat, the mob was on her side, but the verdict had been decided long before she entered. Guilty. The sentence, death within 24 hours. She returned to cell 280 for the last time. It was 4 a.m. on the morning of her death. The silence was heavy, broken only by the scratching of a quill against paper. She asked for pen and ink to write her final testament, a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. This letter remains one of the most heartbreaking documents in history. In the face of imminent death, there was no anger in her words, no call for revolution or revenge. There was only grace. She wrote, I pardon my enemies for the evils they have done to me. She poured her final thoughts onto the page, begging her children to remain united and never to seek vengeance for her execution. She finished the letter, kissed the paper as if sending a final touch to the children she would never see again, and folded it. But even this small comfort was denied. The guards snatched the letter from her table immediately. It would never reach her family. It lay forgotten in a drawer of revolutionary paperwork for 20 years. As the candle flickered and died, Marie Antoinette sat in the darkness, waiting for the sun to rise on her final day. 7 a.m., October 16th. The final humiliation began. The heavy door swung open to reveal the executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson. He held a pair of large, rusted shears. He was not there to kill her yet, but to prepare the victim. She was told to change her clothes. She wanted to wear her black mourning dress to the scaffold, a final sign of respect for her husband. The Republic refused. They forced her to strip and wear a plain white dress, the garment of a criminal, the color of surrender. Then, Sanson approached. Turn around, madam. She sat on a wooden stool. The cold metal touched her neck. In crude, choppy motions, he sheared off her hair so the blade of the guillotine would have a clean path. Her white locks piled up on the dirty floor. She didn't cry. She watched her identity fall away. Then, they bound her hands behind her back. They tied them so tight the rope bit into her skin. She gasped. Must you bind me? She asked. The king was not bound. The guard sneered. You are not the king. When the king was taken to his execution, he rode in a closed carriage, shielded from the eyes of the crowd. Marie Antoinette was denied this final mercy. She was led out to a tumbrel, an open manure cart used for hauling filth and common criminals. She was forced to sit backward on a simple wooden plank, her hands tied painfully behind her back, unable to steady herself against the violent jolts of the wheels on the cobblestones. As the heavy iron gates of the conciergerie swung open, a physical wall of noise hit her. Thousands of citizens lined the streets, a sea of hatred screaming for her blood. They threw rotten vegetables, they spat insults, they chanted death to the Austrian. But the woman in the cart did not shrink away. From a window above, the artist Jacques-Louis David watched. He sketched her in real time. His drawing captures the truth of that hour. A woman stripped of her beauty, her hair jagged, her face hollow, yet sitting with a spine of steel. She did not weep. She did not beg. She stared straight ahead, looking past the mob, past the hatred, as if she were already looking into another world. To the crowd, she was a monster to be jeered at. But in her silence, she became a statue of defiance. The ride lasted over an hour, an eternity of humiliation. Finally, the cart turned into the place de la Révolution. The noise deafened the air, and there, towering against the gray sky, stood the guillotine. The cart finally stopped at the foot of the scaffold. Executioner Sanson offered his hand to help her descend, but Marie Antoinette shook her head. Even here, with her hands bound and her life measured in seconds, she refused to be pitied. She climbed the steep wooden steps alone, stumbling slightly, but never losing her resolve. The roar of the crowd died down into a suffocating silence. 20,000 people held their breath, waiting for the monster to die. But at the top of the platform, something unexpected happened. Disoriented by the wind, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. It was a clumsy, human mistake. She paused. She looked at the man who was about to take her life. She didn't scream. She didn't curse the revolution. She simply whispered, "Pardon me, sir. I did not do it on purpose." Those were her last words. A final apology. A final proof that she remained a lady to the very end. Before the crowd could process this quiet act of dignity, the assistants seized her. They strapped her to the plank. The wooden collar snapped shut around her neck with a deafening clack. For a split second, she stared down into the basket. Then, the latch was pulled. The blade fell. The silence was shattered by a thunderous cheer, but the woman who died had already won the final victory. Her body was tossed into an unmarked grave at the Madeleine Cemetery, her head placed between her legs. There were no flowers, no coffin, no prayers. The revolutionaries threw quicklime over her remains, a chemical designed to burn through flesh and bone, hoping to dissolve her completely, to erase her from the earth as if she had never existed. They believed they could bury her legacy along with her body. They were wrong. Symbols cannot be easily destroyed. Years later, when the bloodlust of the revolution had finally cooled, her remains were recovered. The woman who was denied a simple grave was finally carried to the Basilica of Saint Denis to rest in peace among the kings and queens of France. But her true monument is not built of stone. It is built of the grace she showed in her darkest hour. Marie Antoinette was not a saint. She was a flawed ruler in a turbulent time. But the punishment she endured, the psychological torture, the theft of her children, the relentless humiliation, far exceeded her crimes. In the end, she defeated her enemies not with an army, but with a quiet, unshakable dignity. Her final apology to her executioner remains a testament that even when stripped of everything, the human spirit can remain unbroken. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe to help us keep history alive. What do you think? Was she a villain or a victim? Let us know in the comments.